It started like any other inspection, cold and routine, with eyes scanning every detail as if searching for the smallest crack in the armor. She stood straight, her uniform pressed, her expression calm, but there was something about her presence that demanded attention even before a word was spoken. The officers in the room had no idea who she really was, nor the history that clung to her skin like a shadow. To them, she was just another recruit, another name on a list. But when they ordered her to remove the uniform, the air seemed to thicken, and all eyes locked onto her. At first, it was supposed to be nothing more than a formality, a way of ensuring order and discipline. But the moment the fabric slipped from her shoulder, silence filled the room. What they saw was not a scar, not a mark of shame, but something that carried far more weight. Etched into her skin was the unmistakable emblem of the Death Brigade, a symbol whispered about in hushed tones, tied to stories of fear and unshakable loyalty. It wasn't just ink. It was a statement, a history, and a secret that should have never been exposed in that room. The officers froze, their rigid authority suddenly shaken. They weren't just looking at a tattoo. They were staring at a truth that none of them were prepared to confront. Questions rippled through their minds. Who was she really? And why was she here, standing among them under a false identity? Was she an enemy, a survivor, or someone on a mission far bigger than any of them could understand? Her gaze didn't waver. She didn't explain, didn't defend herself. The silence between her and the stunned officers was heavier than any words could be. That mark on her skin told a story of battles fought, of loyalty tested, of a past that refused to stay buried. And in that moment, one thing became clear. This wasn't just about a uniform. It was about a revelation that could change everything. What happened next would leave the room divided, some questioning their loyalty, others fearing what her presence meant. But one truth was undeniable. The secret she carried had just been uncovered, and nothing would ever be the same again. The room remained frozen in silence, as if time itself had paused after that tattoo was revealed. No one spoke, yet everyone was thinking the same thing. How had she managed to slip through the ranks without anyone noticing? The Death Brigade was not just a name on old records. It was a force remembered for its unyielding strength and for vanishing from history without a trace. To see their mark here, in this very place, was like watching a ghost walk into the room. She stood calm, almost too calm, her eyes meeting each stare with quiet defiance. The tattoo was bold, deliberate, and carved with precision. Not the kind someone would get by mistake or out of admiration. It was a brand of belonging, a vow inked in loyalty. The older officers exchanged uneasy glances, their lips pressed tight, while the younger ones shifted, unsure of whether to treat her as a threat or as someone worthy of respect. Whispers began to rise like smoke. Some of them had grown up hearing the stories. The Death Brigade was rumored to have survived impossible battles, to fight not for power, but for a cause that was never fully explained. Others said they had disbanded, scattered, never to be seen again. And yet here she was, a living reminder that those stories were not just myths. The commander cleared his throat, trying to steady the room, but even his voice carried a tremor. He asked her name again, slower this time, as if expecting a different answer. She gave it without hesitation, her tone steady, but there was something in the way she said it, as if it carried layers no one else could understand. That confidence only deepened the unease. Every pair of eyes was searching for clues. Was she hiding in plain sight, or had she come here on purpose? And if she had, what did she want? No one dared ask directly, but the questions lingered like storm clouds. For the first time, the authority in the room felt fragile, and the power dynamic had shifted. She didn't need to raise her voice or move a muscle. Her silence spoke louder than any uniform or title could. Somewhere in that heavy stillness, a chilling thought began to form. If one member of the Death Brigade was here, could there be more? And if so, what did their return mean for everyone in that room and beyond? The answers remained locked in her calm expression, and the longer she stood there, the more the mystery grew. The silence stretched on until it became unbearable. No one dared to move, yet everyone's mind was racing. The tattoo on her skin was more than a symbol. It was a challenge to their authority. It meant she had lived a life beyond their understanding, one tied to a force they thought had disappeared forever. The commander's jaw tightened as he wrestled with his next step. Was he looking at a soldier who had infiltrated their ranks, or a survivor with knowledge that could change the balance of power? She didn't flinch under their scrutiny. In fact, she seemed to draw strength from it, as if she had expected this moment all along. Her silence made the officers uneasy, but what unsettled them more was the realization that none of their training had prepared them for this. Orders and regulations felt thin against the weight of a legacy standing before them. One younger officer, unable to hold his tongue, asked her directly why she bore the Death Brigade's mark. She didn't answer. Instead, the corners of her mouth lifted ever so slightly, a hint of knowing, as if the truth was not for them to demand. The conflict began to split the room. Some whispered that she should be removed immediately, that she couldn't be trusted. Others argued that she could be an ally, someone who had knowledge of hidden strategies and forgotten battles. After all, the stories of the Death Brigade were filled with impossible victories, of soldiers who fought with a loyalty that never wavered. If even part of those stories were true, then her presence meant she carried secrets worth more than gold. Yet beneath those arguments ran a deeper fear. What if she wasn't alone? What if the Death Brigade was quietly returning, embedding themselves where no one expected? The idea unsettled even the boldest voices. Trusting her could be dangerous, but ignoring her could be worse. She remained composed, her gaze fixed on the commander. It was clear she had chosen not to defend herself, but to force them into revealing their own doubts. The conflict wasn't just about who she was, but about who they were when faced with her presence. Were they protectors of order, or men too afraid to confront the truth staring back at them? And as the tension thickened, one thing became certain. The story of the Death Brigade was far from over, and its shadow had just returned to haunt them all. The air in the room grew heavier with every passing second. No one dared to break the silence, yet every heart was pounding louder than the words they couldn't speak. The commander's hand hovered near his desk, as if steadying himself, but his eyes never left her. The Death Brigade tattoo still burned in their minds, a mark that seemed to shift the ground beneath their feet. They had trained for discipline, for order, but nothing had prepared them for a revelation like this. One of the younger officers finally snapped, his voice sharp against the stillness. He demanded answers, his words trembling between fear and authority. But she stood silent, her posture firm, her eyes locked on him, as though measuring his courage. The silence after his question was worse than any answer could have been, and the young officer quickly fell back into place, his cheeks flushed with unease. It was clear she was not going to make this easy for them. Whispers of the Death Brigade's past filled the space like invisible echoes. The older men remembered the rumors of their final mission, a disappearance that no one had been able to explain. Some claimed they had been destroyed. Others swore they had gone underground, waiting for the right moment to return. And now, staring at her, it felt like those old stories had come back to life, demanding to be acknowledged. The commander leaned forward, finally breaking the suffocating silence. His voice was calm, but carried the weight of years in power. He told her that secrets could not live inside these walls, not when so much was at stake. Yet even as he spoke, there was hesitation in his tone. It wasn't just about uncovering her truth. It was about facing what it meant for all of them if the Death Brigade's legacy still breathed. She didn't move. Instead, she raised her chin, as if daring them to confront what they feared most. Every second of her silence was like a fuse burning towards something none of them could stop. The officers shifted uneasily, glancing at one another, waiting for someone else to act. The tension had reached its breaking point, a moment so fragile that the smallest spark could shatter it. And then, just as the room seemed ready to collapse under its own weight, she finally drew in a breath, her lips parting as though she was about to speak. The officers leaned in, every muscle tense, bracing themselves for words that could change everything. Her lips parted, and every soul in the room leaned forward, desperate to catch the first words. But instead of an explanation, a faint smile curved across her face, one that felt less like confession and more like a warning. Before she could speak, a sound broke through the tense silence. The heavy steel doors at the far end of the hall rattled, and then a coded knock echoed against them. Every officer stiffened. No one was supposed to enter without clearance. The commander's eyes darted to the guards, but they were already frozen, their hands hovering near their weapons. The knock came again, steady and deliberate, carrying a rhythm that made the older officers pale. It was not random. It was a signal most of them hadn't heard in years, but one they could not mistake, the Death Brigade's code. The woman lowered her gaze, not in shame, but as if acknowledging something inevitable. The room, already thick with unease, now bristled with dread. If she was connected to the brigade, and if someone else was outside using that signal, then the threat was no longer a shadow of the past. It was here, at their doorstep. Whispers broke out, louder this time, some officers urging the commander to open the door, others insisting they should lock it down immediately. The commander's hand clenched as he weighed the decision. To ignore the signal would be to deny the truth. To answer it might unleash something none of them were prepared for. The woman finally spoke, her voice calm, but carrying a weight that silenced the whispers instantly. "You already know who waits outside." The words cut deeper than any admission. She didn't explain further, and she didn't need to. The officers exchanged nervous glances, their minds racing. Was the brigade here to reclaim her? To test them? Or worse, had they already infiltrated more than just this room? The knocking stopped, leaving a silence even more chilling than the sound itself. All eyes returned to her, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she lifted her sleeve higher, revealing not just one mark, but faint traces of others, symbols layered beneath the main tattoo. The realization spread through the room like fire. Her story was deeper than a single emblem, and whatever the brigade wanted, she was the key to it. The commander's breath caught as he realized the truth. The conflict was no longer about one woman with a hidden past. It was about what stood just beyond that door, waiting to step into their world and change it forever. The commander's voice finally cut through the tension. With a sharp nod, he ordered the doors opened. The guards hesitated, but the weight of command forced them forward. The steel doors groaned as they swung wide, and the room held its breath. Standing there in the dim light were three figures, silent, motionless, their uniforms stripped of insignias yet marked by the same haunting tattoos. The Death Brigade was no myth. They were here, alive, and they had come together at this very moment. The woman stepped forward, her presence commanding as if she had been waiting for this reunion all along. The officers tensed, some raising their weapons, but no one fired. The brigade members did not move aggressively. They simply stood, their eyes fixed on her, as though awaiting a signal. She turned slowly back to the room, her expression steady. "You wanted the truth," she said. "Here it is. We never disappeared. We only waited." Gasps rippled across the room. The stories of the Death Brigade's survival were true, and she had just confirmed it. But her next words cut even deeper. "I came here not to infiltrate you, but to warn you. What we once fought is rising again, and you are not ready." The commander's grip on the desk tightened as the meaning sank in. The brigade had not come to destroy, but to reveal that a larger enemy loomed beyond their walls. The climax unfolded in an instant of raw clarity. The officers, once divided, now stood on the edge of a decision that would define them. They could see the truth in her eyes and in the silent loyalty of the brigade outside. Everything they thought was buried in history was alive again, and it demanded an answer. But before anyone could speak, the unexpected twist came. One of the three figures outside stepped forward and removed his sleeve. His tattoo bore not the brigade's emblem, but a mark none of them recognized, something newer, darker, and unfinished. The woman's expression flickered, for the first time showing unease. This wasn't the brigade as she had known it. Something within their ranks had changed. The final revelation was clear. While the brigade had returned, they were no longer united. A fracture had formed, and what waited beyond those doors was not just an old ally or enemy. It was something even more unpredictable. The true battle was only beginning. The room stood in stunned silence as the meaning of that unfamiliar mark began to sink in. For years they had believed the Death Brigade was nothing more than a ghost story, and now not only were they standing face to face with its members, but they were seeing cracks in the very unity that had once made the brigade legendary. The woman looked at the man who had stepped forward, her eyes narrowing. It was not anger that crossed her face, but a heavy sadness, as if she already knew what this betrayal meant. She turned back to the commander, her voice quieter now, but steady. "This is why I came. The world you think you control is already changing. The brigade's loyalty is no longer whole. Some of us still remember the oath. Others have forged their own path, driven by power instead of purpose." Her words carried no bitterness, only truth, and the weight of it settled over everyone like a shadow. The commander finally broke his silence. "Then you are not here to fight us?" She shook her head. "No, I came here to choose, to show you the truth so you would understand that what lies ahead cannot be faced alone. The enemy is not me. It is what comes when unity is broken and loyalty is sold." The man with the darker tattoo said nothing, but his silence was telling. He turned, vanishing into the corridor without a word, leaving only the echo of his footsteps behind. The other two brigade members bowed their heads slightly to the woman, a gesture of trust, before following her lead. For the first time, the tension in the room began to ease, though the weight of what they had witnessed would never leave them. The officers lowered their weapons, but the silence that remained was no longer born of fear. It was the silence of realization. Their world had just shifted. The myths they grew up hearing were alive, but they were not the same. The Death Brigade was fractured, and that fracture would shape the battles yet to come. As she left the room, the woman's final words lingered behind her. "You have a choice now. You can cling to the order you know, or prepare for the storm that's coming." The doors closed, and with them, the officers were left not with fear, but with a decision that would define their future. The legend of the Death Brigade was no longer a story. It had become their reality.